I have 7 days to make a game, but I'm stuck in a car 5 hours from home. You'd think this would be perfect for thinking about an idea, and I thought so too. But the theme for the Brackeys Game Jam 2026.1 was Strange Places. A theme so flexible you could make almost any mechanic around it. I didn't just want to make a boring platform game in a strange environment. I wanted the environment to be the game mechanic. So I spent the entire time thinking of way too complicated ideas and trying to get inspiration from other people's ideas in the Brackeys Discord server, but with no results. When I finally came home, I still didn't have an idea. I didn't even know if I wanted to make a 2D or 3D game, but I chose 3D because I'm not an artist. How am I supposed to make a strange place in 2D? I quickly got all the basic movement and camera controls done by just reusing code from my previous 3D game. But what next? If the environment is the game mechanic, should I make a puzzle game, like an escape room? I was already thinking about puzzle game ideas in the car, but now I started to get ideas I could actually make. Admittedly, I was a bit scared to think of making a puzzle game, because I've never made one before and I had no idea if I could come up with good puzzles. But hey, why am I even doing a game jam? To learn and make something I've never made before. So an escape room game it will be. And to make it strange, it should have multiple weird rooms. But what would be a great way to transition from room to room? How about an elevator? So I started with building the elevator and immediately added post-processing so I could already plan what the game would look like from the beginning. I added some grain for a slightly more strange look and spent an hour trying to figure out how lighting works. Because for some reason some lights just don't want to work like others. And that's all I did on the first day. So I did at least come up with the idea, but I didn't have any puzzles planned yet, and with such a poor first day, I wasn't actually very confident with my idea yet. So that's why I started day 2 by planning some of the rooms and puzzles I was gonna make. Now, since this is a puzzle game, there will be some spoilers in this video, so if you want to play the game blind, go play it right now at the link in the description. I came up with a few ideas for strange rooms, such as a giant office room where you are small, a room where gravity is upside down, and a room that isn't even a room, but actually a forest. I started by making the first room, which would be just completely white and empty. This room doesn't actually serve much purpose, but I thought it would be strange to start in a white room and just see the elevator in front of you. Speaking of the elevator, I decided to completely remake it in Blender and added a bit more detail and buttons. And since I already have Blender open, let's just also make a chair and put it in the white room. Now that's strange for sure. I don't want to spoil too much of the puzzle, but remember this chair. Now let's make the elevator work so we can start to create the other rooms. Buttons are pretty simple. I'm just gonna shoot a ray at the button, and if I press E, the door opens. But of course that wasn't enough for me, so I made them glow. Then I spent a couple hours trying to make the elevator actually move and copied the room to test it. And it works! We have a functioning elevator now. So now we only need to make a couple rooms and some fun puzzles. Should be smooth sailing from now, right? Yeah, I thought it would be easy, but day 3 was gonna flip all my expectations upside down. So this was my plan for the week. Day 3 and 4 built 2 rooms each day, and day 5 built the last room. That would leave me with 2 whole days to finish puzzles, do audio design, polishing and whatever. So I wasn't really stressed, but when I started to work on the giant office room, I realized that I would have to design and model an entire office room, and that felt like too much, especially because I wanted to model everything in this game myself. So I scrapped the idea completely. Now I had this giant room and no idea what to do with it. I started to lose confidence in the whole game again. So I spent an hour thinking and planning the puzzle more. The original idea for the giant office room was to parkour up to a shelf and grab an item. So now I just needed a different room where the player could find that item. And then I came up with an amazing solution, an infinite labyrinth room. I just didn't think about how difficult it would be to make. I only made one room first and filled it with weird paintings. But then the problem was, how do I make an infinite labyrinth? I wanted it to be random, so I couldn't just build a fixed path. My first idea was to spawn room prefabs, but then I realized the rooms would eventually start overlapping. I thought I could solve it by destroying old rooms, but then it started to get way too complicated. So I remade the whole system and went with a much simpler approach. I simply teleport the player back to the previous room and swap the paintings every time the player tries to enter the next room. And if the transition is seamless, it should create the illusion of an infinite maze. Except for that the player doesn't rotate properly. But after fixing that, it now looks a lot better. Then I just needed to actually make the puzzle, so you know which room is correct. But I'm not gonna reveal to you how this puzzle works, that's for you to find out. Then for the reward, I made a drawer and put an item in there that you get if you go to the correct room 10 times in a row. And after 11 hours, the room is finally done. Which means we are already behind schedule, but hopefully tomorrow will be better. On the next day I started working on a new floor, and can you guess what this is gonna be? No, you can't. It's an ice block. I scrapped the gravity room idea because I didn't really have an idea how to connect it to the puzzle. So instead I filled this room with ice blocks of different sizes. In this room you have to parkour your way up to the drawer to get an item. I wanted the puzzle to be moving the ice blocks around so you could form a way to get up, but currently you can just climb an ice block and get up super easily. Then I made this item and put it in the ice, and that's the last time we're talking about this item. The ice room is pretty good now, so I moved on to the next floor. This one was easy to make because the room would be completely dark, and I'm also not gonna show much of it because that would spoil what there actually is. But I'm gonna show you how I added all these useless blocks and balls in here. If you're watching this after playing the game, I hope this confused you. So at this point we've already used over half of the jam time, but I only have to make 2 more floors. Luckily I had left a lot of room in the schedule, so being a bit behind didn't feel too stressful. At least not yet. I started day 5 by making the final floor, the exit. I had planned for lava to be the obstacle between you and the exit, so I made a long room with a large pool in it. Then I started making the lava, and this is super embarrassing. I might have gotten a little too comfortable with the time I had left, because I spent 6 hours trying to make the lava look good. I'm not kidding, this lava would have worked just fine, but instead I tried to learn how these nodes in Blender work to make a cool texture. And I did make it look cool, even animated it, but then I didn't know how I could get this into Unity, so I just ended up using this texture and moving it with code. And that's when the next problem showed up. Do you see this edge? Yeah, the texture was obviously not gonna look properly, so I had to modify the image to look continuous. And after adding some light and fire and smoke particles, the lava looks pretty good now. Then I started to work on the last floor remaining, the forest. Huge thanks to this video by Spader the Bomb, sorry if I spelled that incorrectly. It led me to discover the terrain object in Unity, which just lets you make terrain super easily. I spent a while messing around with this and experimenting with different materials. Then I accidentally turned it into a really cool looking lava land. Maybe this can be the worth for my next project, but now I need to turn this into a forest. So I made a green material and a texture for the mountains. Then I drew a crash sprite that I could easily add by just painting it on the terrain. And this even has wind settings and scale randomization. I love this tool, I can't believe I didn't know about this. Adding fog was also really easy through the lighting settings. So even with the lava being a mess, I did make some nice progress. But would the lost time come to bite me tomorrow? Let's find out. On day 6 I made a tree and a rock and filled the terrain with them, which was also really easy thanks to the terrain tool. Then I made a flower, and this is again an example of wasting time on a detail that doesn't matter in a jam. Like, I'm on day 6, the puzzle isn't even fully planned yet, and here I am making 3D flowers. This next thing was worth it though. I found an awesome skybox from the Unity asset store, and now the forest looks really good. So now it was time to focus on the puzzles. First of all, I made the ice room a lot more difficult by removing the ability to just climb the ice blocks. Then I made a fireplace and worked on a couple other mechanics for quite a long time. I don't wanna show too much, but here's a funny bug that made this ice block freak out. Back at the forest I had placed a ton of trees to make a border, but it wasn't dense enough and you could get through it, so I made some invisible giant hitboxes as a cheap backup solution. And that's all I can show for day 6. I still don't have all the puzzle mechanics done, so the last day is gonna be really busy. Now there are less than 24 hours remaining and the gameplay still isn't finished, so I quickly made the mechanic to get across the lava and started working on the last puzzle. I wanted an item to be buried under dirt, so I made this area in the forest. But how would I bury it and be able to dig it up? I thought about this for a bit and went with a simple, performance heavy and ugly looking solution. I made a dirt object and duplicated a bunch of them above the item, so when you enter the forest for the first time, all these objects start falling, burying the item and causing a bit of frame drop. At least I got this to work pretty quickly, so I could move on to making an ending for the game. Here we have the exit door, so let's just put some green glow behind it and show this text after you enter it. Not the craziest ending, but at least something. Then I added some small necessary things like a crosshair and interaction prompt texts. I playtested the game a bit, fixed bugs and tried to make the ice parkour more fair. And finally I made a quick menu screen. Alright, the game is pretty good now and it's playable. Oh no, there's still no audio. I originally wanted to try to make a song by myself, but there was no more time for that. So I searched for some elevator music and sound effects from Pixabay, slept a bit in between and worked like crazy during the final hours the next morning. I picked this song for both the menu and the elevator and added some effects on it to make it sound like it comes from an elevator speaker. For the forest I used some calm nature sounds, and unlike my last game I now had a ton of sound effects. Okay, audio done. How much time do I have left? 1 hour! I did some final playtests and found a lot of things that I had to fix, like not hearing the lava and the fire sound effects, and the menu button not working. Luckily, these were easy fixes, so 20 minutes before the deadline, I was building my game for submission. But wait, what do I call the game? How about Elevator Escape? I don't really like the name, but whatever. I named it like that and submitted my game with just 6 minutes to spare. I was relieved, but this was not the end yet, because when I tried to play the game on the page, the text on the buttons looked like this. Luckily, there was a 48-hour period to fix bugs, so I fixed this easily by just moving the text slightly on the Z-axis. This was not the only bug though. For some reason, some of the rocks were the same material as the ground, and I still don't know why. And when I sent my game to a streamer to play, this happened.
I don't even know where that... Wait.
The item clipped through the elevator, making it impossible to complete. That was pretty bad, so I fixed it by adding a big hitbox as a safety net that would teleport any item back to the elevator. And that's where development for this jam finally ended. Now it's time to relax and play other people's games, and in 14 days we will know how well my game did. The results are finally here, and with 29 ratings, these are my scores. Overall, I placed 382nd out of 1431 games, so this is the first time my game is in the top 30%. The best categories were theme and audio, which are usually the ones I'm the worst at. Using free sound effects proved to work, I guess. Gameplay and enjoyment were a bit lower. I guess if you can't figure out the infinite labyrinth, there isn't much to play, and that isn't very enjoyable, so I should have maybe added some clues to help with it. Surprisingly, visuals was my lowest ranked category, even though I expected it to be one of my best. But looking at the scores, turns out it actually has the second highest score. So I guess there just were a lot of games with good visuals. I'm really happy with these results. These are my best scores yet, and I also think it's my best game so far. Let me know what you think about it though. You can play it right now for free on my itch.io page at the link in the description. There won't be a game jam in a while, so I'm gonna start working on some other games now. Subscribe so you won't miss those. And that's about it. Thanks for watching, like the video if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.